My prompt for writing this reflection was the question, what does the religion of the future look like? And what does this mean specifically for Unitarian Universalism and our community here in Redwood City? I don't have an answer to that question. What I do have to share is my own story, reflecting on the religion of my past and the faith that I see for my future. I was raised Presbyterian. We went to church regularly, and I enjoyed attending Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and youth group. I mostly remember learning that God loved me and that I was called to share that love with others. While salvation, sin, and hell must have been mentioned from time to time, they weren't a focus. When I was a preteen, I experienced a cluster of losses. My parents divorced, and my dad moved out while my mom fell apart emotionally. My two older brothers went away to college, and my closest friends moved away. Within a few years, my happy childhood was transformed into a largely insecure and unhappy adolescence. In high school, I often sought love and validation from boys in unhealthy ways. But just before my senior year, I fell for a boy named Mike, who was a born-again Christian. He took me to a Pentecostal service with lots of speaking in tongues. I found that overwhelming and scary, but Mike inspired me to renew a relationship with God. This gave me comfort, and my renewed efforts to be a good Christian helped me set healthier boundaries. Concurrently, my father had become decidedly agnostic. He still attended church with my stepmother, but he refused to recite prayers or creeds. Nevertheless, my dad told me that he was glad I had faith in God because he knew that it could be helpful to people. I didn't like it that my father seemed to want me to believe in something that he thought was just an illusion. After college, I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Papua New Guinea, stationed at an Anglican mission. In my initial homesickness, I attended the local church and reached out to the Anglican priest, looking for comfort, but never quite found it. Christianity, which had been imported into this developing country to replace traditional beliefs and bring with it aid and development, it didn't seem to fit there. While I gained much from my Peace Corps service, my Christian faith seriously faltered. When I returned to the U.S., my father suggested that I try Unitarian Universalism. I joined my first UU fellowship, soon felt like I was part of a family, and remained really active for several years. But over the next 15 years or so, I moved around a lot. I visited a few other UU congregations and found them a bit spotty. When I was in veterinary school, the local UU fellowship was just 6 people in a meeting room on campus. I often had other priorities and fell away from religion. Around 2015, when my husband, Jason, who grew up Jewish, and I applied to become foster parents, we took a test that assessed how well we were aligned in various areas. We scored lowest in spiritual alignment. At the suggestion of the foster care agency, we started looking for a religious community and found Sierra Foothills Unitarian Universalists in Auburn. When our son Sebastian joined our family, SFUU became the epicenter of our lives. All of our lives. Leaving that community was the most difficult part of our move to the Bay Area almost 3 years ago. And that's why we started attending UUFRC right away after our move. We wanted to fill that void as quickly as possible. Since we've moved, life has felt harder than it used to. Whoops, sorry. Sadness over friends we left behind, guilt over moving the whole family here for a job that turned out to be a terrible fit. financial challenges due to a much higher cost of living, a moody teenage son, the pandemic, I find myself needing more comfort, and I am increasingly drawn back to the Christian faith of my youth. The most obvious manifestation of this is that I listen to contemporary Christian songs through many of my waking hours. Some of these songs are funky and danceable. Some others are melodic and beautiful, with titles like I Won't Let You Go, Blessings on Blessings, Peace Be Still, and Your Love is Strong. These songs are like prayers to me, and I need to hear them and sing along with them. I've also recently attended an early morning Christian service some Sundays, although it's honestly a bit much to attend 2 church services in the same morning. Finally, I just started serving as a liaison to the Peninsula Multi-Faith Coalition, in part because I hope it may bring me closer to those who share a definite belief in God. My husband worries that if it wasn't for him, that I'd quit being a UU and rush headlong into a Christian church. I don't think that's the case. While Unitarian Universalism doesn't overtly promise me that I am a beloved child of God the same way Christianity does, I deeply appreciate this covenantal religion with its 7 principles and 6 sources. By holding me to a commitment to build beloved community within UUFRC, this fellowship inspires me to be a better person in the world. I am grateful that the UU sources mention Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love, but also include wisdom from other world religions, the guidance of reason and results of science, and teachings to live in harmony with nature. The 7 UU principles provide me with a much better moral code than the Bible could. And with my history of undulating Christian faith, I especially value that Unitarian Universalism affirms and promotes a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Finally, I'm grateful to all of you, this beloved community, who have gathered here today in person and online and listened to my story. I'd love to share some of my favorite Christian songs with any of you who are interested.
Well, Barbie can maybe duck the question as does religion have a future, but I've got a vested interest in it. Given that I'm dedicating my life and it's my vocation right now, so I really hope the answer's yes. And I think it's important to each of us here, whether a life of faith, whether religion has a future. I think it's important to all of us, because I think at its heart what religion is finding hope. Do we have a hopeful future? I think that's fundamental to all religions. They're giving us some sense of where we are going as a nation, where are we going as people, where are we going as individuals, where are we going as a planet. And I think we are people of faith, and I know faith is a loaded word, so I'm going to be talking a lot about that today. So I'll note who bolts for the exit at that point. The Christian thinker Harvey Cox says, "It's true that for many people, faith and belief are just 2 words for the same thing. But they are not the same. Faith is about deep-seated confidence. Belief, on the other hand, is more like an opinion. Beliefs can be held lightly or with emotional intensity, but they are more propositional than existential. We can believe something to be true without it making much difference to us. But we place our faith only in something that is vital for the way we live. We place our faith only in something that is vital for the way we live." Those are the words of Christian thinker Harvey Cox. And religion in the US and where I'm from in Europe is in decline. People are attending church less often. People have more loose affiliation to religion. And in Europe, religion in most Western European countries at least is decimated. I read one time in my home country of Scotland, 6% of people attend church. And I always think that's really strange because I look at the 20th century, and for those of us growing up in Western Europe, and for most of us here, remember living through the Cold War where the threat of nuclear war was very real. It was a very real threat. And with that anxiety, you would think that people would be looking for some hope, for some reason. But I think religion generally was so out of touch, it wasn't relevant for most of us. Too much of religion was about dogma and beliefs. It wasn't related to people's everyday life. It didn't give people hope. It didn't really let people know that we are called to love thy neighbor. Or as Barbie mentioned, that we are beloved children of God. Religion wasn't about that. I think religion is more often known for what we hate and disagree with than what we love and agree with. So I think it's understandable why religion's in decline. And I think the threat of nuclear war has kind of raised its head again with the actions of Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, who's actually threatening it again. And so that's stirring up a lot. I know it's probably triggering for many of us who remember what it was like living through the Cold War. And I was a bit young for the Cuban Missile Crisis, but without giving your age away, I'm sure some of you maybe remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we have these existential threats. You know, we've got climate change as well. And religion has been slow in addressing environmental issues. It's improved now, but I would even say Unitarian Universalism is slow to embrace environmental justice as a spiritual cause. So faith is about deep-seated confidence. But when I really sat down to think about this, I was far more aware about what I've lost faith in than what I have faith in. I invite each of you to think, what throughout your life, perhaps recently, perhaps earlier in your life, what have you lost faith in? I've lost faith in the idea that progress is inevitable. World wars, Holocaust, the pervasive genocides, the pervasive violence in our society, both locally and worldwide, threats to democracy, climate crisis, economic inequality, targeting of transgender youth in Texas, which is absolutely abhorrent, dehumanizing those who are different. There's a lot that I'm really starting to question whether progress is inevitable. And I think I grew up believing it was. There has been progress in certain areas, but there's huge entrenchment and backsteps happening so many places in our society. I think I've lost faith in the inherent goodness of people. That might sound strange coming from a Unitarian Universalist minister, because we say all people are loved, but I'm struggling to see this inherent goodness of all people. Because I know we've got many good people and we've got some bad characters who gain power and manipulate people, but I think too many of us are complacent about the world around us. And as has been stated many times, all bad people need to gain power and manipulate people is for good people to be complacent. And I think our Unitarian Universalist faith at its best can address that, because there's no room for complacency. And I think I've lost faith in the idea of one objective truth, something that we all agree on. We all bring our life experiences and biases to any situation. And as I've mentioned before, the only thing we can ever learn about looking at someone is our own biases. And we bring those to almost every relationship, every conversation we have. And I'm not sure the idea of agreeing to disagree is okay. There's some things that it's not okay to disagree about. When you are denying the right of transgender youth to live into their full life, that's not something we can disagree or agree about. That is wrong. It's not okay that we can agree to disagree about everything. There's some things we can, but there's some things we need to take a firm stand and say, that is wrong. And we need to take those stands. And so this idea of loss of faith, there's basically three paths you can take when you start questioning and losing your faith. There's religious fundamentalism. There's religious progressives like ourselves. And then there's those who just give up on religion. I sometimes feel that Unitarian Universalism can often be the last stop before people give up on religion. And I understand that. But we're so much more than that. We're not just the least worst option for religious education. But religious fundamentalism, it's in decline as well. I mean, there was a lot of growth in the 70s and 80s in religious fundamentalism. But one of its problems, and Harvey Cox in the earlier reading kind of implicitly said this, it claps faith into belief with this unyielding insistence that faith consists of believing in certain doctrine. And the most common one in religious fundamentalism is Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And it puts a primacy on Jesus. And I think for many Unitarian Universalists, even including many Unitarian Universalist Christians, having that primacy is a struggle because we believe there's many, many paths to the sacred. There's many, many paths to the divine. And picking out one singular over others can be a struggle for us. I think one of the things I struggle with is this idea of fundamentalism, is this idea of the literal Bible. As Barbie mentioned, our 7 principles are a better ethical guide than the Bible. The Bible justifies war, it justifies the slaughter of children, it justifies the discrimination of women, it condemns homosexuality. None of those are ethically good, life-affirming, life-enhancing, life-saving messages. They're abhorrent messages. But the other struggle I have, too much of religion is about belief in the unbelievable. You know, this idea of miracles that go against my understanding of science, go against my lived experience. So religion cannot be about beliefs in the unbelievable. It needs to be something more for me. And hence, that's where I lost my faith. I also grew up Presbyterian. But I think one of the worst things that all religions can be guilty of is just used to back up our own prejudices and for justifying existing structures of power. It supports sexism and homophobia. It justifies monarchies with the divine right of king. And the Bible was even used to justify slavery. Every state that succeeded from the Union at the beginning of the Civil War used biblical passages to justify succeeding from the Union to support slavery. So much for the bad news. The Catholic Archbishop of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Bakoli Walunga, says this: faith is not a momentary feeling, but a struggle against discouragement that threatens us every time we meet with resistance. Faith is not a momentary feeling, but a struggle against the discouragement that threatens us every time we meet with resistance. And for me, faith, my religious faith, my Unitarian Universalist faith, is a resistance to the ever-tempting fall into cynicism and despair regarding the state of the world and the hardships, the personal hardships we encounter in our life. Faith means living a religious life, not subscribing to particular beliefs and doctrines. And the opposite of faith is not doubt. Doubt is a creative partner to my faith. The opposite of faith is despair and certainty. Despair is certainty that there's no possibility of renewal and transformation, therefore no hope. And I think fundamentally where my faith comes from is that renewal. We can renew as individuals. We can renew as a religious community. We can renew as a country. We can renew as a human species to live better today than we did yesterday, to live better tomorrow than we live today. That possibility of renewal that gives me hope. In Unitarian Universalists, we often claim that we are a religion of deeds, not creeds. And then we get caught up about arguments about religious language. What do we mean by God and things like that. And I really encourage us, find a way to come up with an affirming idea of religious language, because religious language is important. It can be grounding, it can be insightful, it can be a launch pad for exploration. For religion to have a future, then our faith needs to be directly connected to people's everyday life and not mired in abstract doctrine or difficult, trivial arguments around language. The minister Samuel Miller says that faith allows us to face everything that makes the world uncomfortable: pain, fear, loneliness, shame, and death, and acts with compassion by these being transformed and even exalted. Even exalted? How can you exalt pain or fear or loneliness or shame or death? And I think it is because we really use that to find meaning. Those are tragic things, but I think one of the things that religion calls us to do is find meaning in our struggles, to find meaning in our suffering. That's what religion can call us to do. And Bill Singford, a former UUA president, talked about the language of reverence. And he mentioned this because his son was in hospital and was near death. He survived, but he was worrying, and he said, we need a language of reverence because no one wants to read 7 principles on their deathbed. And that's true, but I don't think anyone wants to read the 10 Commandments on their deathbed either. I think we look for beauty. We look for something that's life-affirming and inspires us to carry on. We look for hope. We look for that possibility of renewal. So what do I have faith in? I do have faith that doubt and uncertainty are a healthy part of my spiritual and religious identity. And human renewal, my renewal, your renewal, this community's renewal, and our species renewal is my source of hope. I also believe that what I do and how I live matters, and what we do and how we live matters. I'm not certain how much we'll impact people or how many people will be impacted for how long, but I believe what we do in this life matters. And I also fundamentally believe that the world will be a better place if Unitarian Universalist values are more prevalent in the world, more prevalent beyond the doors of this sanctuary, more prevalent in Redwood City, San Mateo County in the US. I strongly believe that. And we had a talk the other day amongst the board about why do we want to grow? And I think the answer we came to was quite easy. We want to grow as a religious community so we have more influence in our community, so we can spread Unitarian Universalist values to the world around us, because I really believe in my heart that the world will be a better place if we do. And I ask you, do you believe that? If our values were more prevalent, would the world be a better place? I believe so. And the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker says, what we need is a revolution in our values. A revolution that turns our attention more reverently in responsibility to the interdependent, relational character of life. What we need is a spiritual and practical revolution that embodies love for neighbour and for the world through sustaining structures of care and responsibility. So my goal as your minister is to create lifelong Unitarian Universalists, not just amongst our children and youth, but amongst everyone who enters our door. I want to build a sense of Unitarian Universalist identity, a sense of engaged Unitarian Universalist values, and a sense of excitement about our religious community. that energizes everyone who comes here and energizes everyone that leaves. Our religious community is where themes of relationships, connection, cooperation, inclusiveness, compassionate interactions can be explored and lived into. The exploration of such themes can take place within all aspects of a church life, not just our worship services, but our social time, our religious education program, our art program, our social justice meetings. Every activity of our church can be a path for connecting. And at its core, religious community needs to inspire each of us to have a spiritual identity, not a political identity. I think many Unitarian Universalists are more comfortable with the political identity. But I really invite you to find a spiritual identity to live into, something that's grounded in the values that are deep-rooted and make a difference in your life. Religious community is not about learning about religion. It's about teaching, and teaching emotions of compassion and empathy and care is difficult, but we can experience compassion, we can experience care, we can experience empathy in this community, both giving it and receiving it. That's what we can do in religious community that I think is very, very hard to do anywhere else. And the Reverend Megan Foley, a Unitarian Universalist minister, says, when we believe that we are supposed to be more, even when we aren't sure what the road to it will be like, that's how we show that we are a people of faith. We have faith when we grow in our personal understanding and find greater meaning in our life, including those hardships. We have faith when we seek justice and care for others in a relationship of equity, love, and compassion. We have faith when we recognize our planet and all life on it as worthy of our respect and care. And we have faith when we do all we can to follow a life larger than ourselves and live that to our highest ideals. Let us be proud of our faith, proud of our religious values, and proud to be people of faith. Let's take our religious values out into that world and transform it.